Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Aging Gayfully podcast. I'm your host, Christopher MacLellan, and I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Andrew Wagner from Here USA in Lighthouse Point in Broward County, Florida. Dr. Wagner, welcome to the Aging Gayfully podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you because, goodness, you've helped me hear better, and now I can do these podcasts without having the big headset on. So it's really a thrill to have you. And I understand this is your first podcast.
First podcast. Glad we got you hooked on hearing, Chris. Maybe we can help some more people by doing this.
Well, that's what we're aiming to do. But I think that, as we do these podcasts, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that people, listeners, viewers, they want to know everybody's story, their why. What led you to audiology?
So communication is a big part of my family. My sister's a speech pathologist. My wife's a speech pathologist. I'm an audiologist. So it all has to do with hearing, speech, communication. But my exposure to the hearing side of things started when I was really young. My best friend growing up, his little brother was completely deaf. He had meningitis when he was 1 year old, and he got what was called a cochlear implant. I'm sure people have seen those big, bulky things sticking on deaf people's ears. Yeah. Without this, he was completely deaf. With the cochlear implant, he had a lot of audibility. He was able to develop spoken word, but a big kind of memory that I have when we were children is I was spending the night sleeping over, having a slumber party at my friend's house, and I was sitting there trying to sneak past his brother who was asleep on the couch, and my friend said real loudly, "He's deaf, his cochlear implant's in, he can't hear you." And it kind of awoke something in me where I was like, I want to learn about this. And throughout the years, I was able to see the progression of the technology, see how the advancement in technology really helped his life, but it really gave him some, fun add-ons. I remember in high school, he got the feature where he could plug his cochlear implant into an iPod and listen to music for the first time. And from then on, you didn't know if when he was in class, was he listening to class or was he listening to music? Because cochlear implants don't make audible sound. He hears through little electrical stimulations in his brain. So, I was exposed really young. It was pretty cool to see how his family reacted to the deaf diagnosis. His mother was an amazing lady. She really dropped what she was doing. She learned sign language. She became a special education teacher and a teacher for, deaf children. His dad didn't really learn sign language as much, but they developed their own, communication, their own signs, as many deaf people do.
What a great story!
Yeah, very cool.
Define your passion through friends, and to kind of follow. It's kind of like following your dreams. Goodness! So tell us about the education behind being an audiologist.
So I've got a bachelor's degree in communication sciences and disorders. I got that at Ohio University. And I decided to stay at Ohio University, and I got my Doctor of Audiology there. So it's 4 years undergraduate, 4 years graduate school. And kind of the way I came from Ohio all the way down to South Florida is that last year you do either it's called an externship or a residency type situation under another doctor. And I was able to do that anywhere in the United States. And I decided, why not go to a beach? Might as well go to South Florida.
You anticipated my follow-up question. What led you to South Florida? And it is usually the beach for most people.
Oh yeah, the weather.
Yes, and this is the best time of the year to be in Florida at the end of November through March. I don't miss the winters, and I'm sure you don't either. Goodness.
I don't miss scraping off the car in the morning and shivering on the way to work.
I always like telling my family in St. Louis, I love looking at snow on TV. Goodness.
I've got about a week tolerance for it, and then I'm ready to come back.
So let's talk about the importance of hearing health and how people can I'm trying to look for the right word because I know I couldn't really tell that I had a hearing loss until so many people kept saying, "Why do you keep asking me to repeat things?" So, what is the trigger for people to really recognize that they've got a hearing problem?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head on that one. A lot of my patients coming in, it's either their spouse, their family member, complaining that the person keeps asking for repetition. And then the patient usually says, I don't have a hearing problem, you just mumble. The most common types of hearing loss, age-related hearing loss, occur in
Mhm.
the higher pitches, and it stops people from being able to hear the initial and final sounds and words. But some of the huge, indicators that maybe it's time to get a hearing test are first age. At the age of 55, most people start to get some form of high frequency hearing loss. It's never bad to get a baseline. That doesn't mean you need a hearing aid at that point. It just means, hey, let's see where we're at. Let's see how fast hearing loss is going to progress because we're all losing our hearing. It's just happening at different rates based off our genetics. Other signs you might need a test, though, are difficulty in noisy places, whether that be a restaurant.
Mhm.
A lot of people watching TV say, hey, I can hear the newscasters, but when I watch a movie, all that music's so loud. Why do they play the music so loud? Well, again, the music's probably covering up a lot of those initial and final consonant sounds. The other indicators are asking people to repeat themselves, like you said, turning the TV volume up. A big one that I'm pretty passionate
Right.
about is when people withdraw from conversation, because I saw it in my grandmother before I was able to get her a hearing aid. People end up just kind of taking a step back and they don't realize they're doing it. But I noticed she wasn't laughing at all the jokes, or she just laughed when everybody else was laughing really quickly.
Right.
She wasn't contributing as much. And in the end of the day, if you're putting so much effort into listening, it's exhausting. Conversations cause a
Right.
lot more fatigue. And then the big indicator, I get a lot of people coming in saying, I've got this sound in my ears. I've got this buzzing in my head. It's called tinnitus or tinnitus, potato, potato. Um, I don't care how you pronounce it, but it usually is an indicator that some form of hearing loss is starting, even if it's not impacting communication.
One of the things that I've been lucky over the years to be involved in the caregiving community and working with a variety of people over the years, and I think when it comes to hearing, we kind of take it for granted
Oh,
that
for sure.
it's something that's always there, but I don't really notice any difference because you don't really recognize it. But I've seen so many examples of folks, and I was experiencing this a little bit myself, that when you're not hearing 100%, and you touched on it just a little bit, and I'd like you to go a little bit more in depth, the isolation that people experience because they just don't want to be around groups or people because it's so frustrating that they can't hear.
Well, to talk about isolation, I'll bring an example my wife gave me. She is a speech pathologist. She had a rotation in a hospital, and she'd walk into these hospital rooms and staff would be like, "Oh, they don't talk. They're nonverbal." And she'd look on the side on next to the little counter, there'd be a set of hearing aids, and she'd pop hearing aids in these people's ears, and voila, these people are able to communicate better. So on the whole caregiving side of things, I see patients all the time coming in with their caregivers, and their caregivers don't even realize that, hey, maybe these hearing aids aren't working appropriately. Maybe the patient or client, I don't know what you call them, maybe they're not responding or as involved because their hearing aids aren't working, they're not wearing them. So it's very important to, make sure if you do have hearing aids, they're working appropriately. Hearing aids aren't the type of thing where you just can put them in and leave them alone. They require some basic maintenance. We need to keep up with them. And again, caregivers should really pay attention to, are they working appropriately? If you notice a drop in your client's communication, something's probably causing it. Um, I forget the initial question, Chris. What was that?
You did great. No, it related to isolation and
Mm.
how people withdraw when they're not hearing, especially in groups. And I see a lot of this in independent and assisted living where they, they just don't go to some of the events, the group events, because they don't hear as well as they'd like to.
My grandmother went into kind of an assisted living type community, and she was really nervous about it. She wasn't very happy about it. But the advice I gave her is treat it like college. You're around a bunch of people your age. You've got all sorts of activities that you can do. And she kind of embraced what I told her to do. She, made friends, got involved with different activities, and isolation is not good. Humans are social creatures. And
Right.
you mentioned, hearing loss kind of taking a back seat. Hearing and communication are the most important things in the world, in my opinion. My wife and I obviously are big advocates for it. She's the speech side, I'm the hearing side, but together you get communication. And the whole group environment's a scary place with hearing loss because you don't want to be the person saying, huh, and then you ask 3 times and then you just nod your head and agree. You don't want to look like you're not paying attention.
Because after a while, you just kind of give up, and then that's when you start withdrawing from activities.
Well, and you also mentioned, it's hearing loss doesn't happen. Well, it can, but in the average person, it does not happen overnight. It's such a gradual type drop, and it's the type of thing I always tell my patients: if you woke up 20 years ago with this hearing loss, you'd say, "Take me to the hospital. Something's wrong," because it's a big drop in a 20-year span. And again, just because you get a hearing test doesn't mean you need a hearing aid. It's good at around the age of 55, get your baseline.
Can you talk a little bit about how hearing loss relates to cognitive decline?
So you're supposed to hear sounds. Your brain is supposed to have to respond to those sounds you hear. And when we have a hearing loss, we'll use an age-related hearing loss. It's called presbycusis. It's a high-pitched loss, for example. There's all sorts of sounds that are just going over your head. Your ear isn't having to send that signal to the brain. Your brain's not having to process that signal, and therefore your brain's having to do a lot less work. The part of your brain responsible for the high frequencies is not being stimulated appropriately. Just like anything, it's a use it or lose it type situation. Now, I'm not saying not getting hearing aids is going to cause, dementia or Alzheimer's, but there's lots of research out there. Hearing loss and cognitive decline go hand in hand. And part of it has to do with the withdrawing from communication. But a big part of it has to do with the actual physiological stimulation process of taking what you hear, sending it up to the brain, and having your brain process those signals. So it's like a muscle. Use it or lose it. Use your ears. It's very important.
Use your ears. So what would a new patient coming to you today at Hear USA and Lighthouse Point, what would they expect from you as a hearing test?
Sure. Just like any doctor, I'm going to sit you down and talk to you. I have 2 types of patients. I got the type of patients who say, I've got a hearing loss. Help me out. Here's what's going on. Sometimes I kind of have to, play detective and see what's really going on. I've got a lot of denial. Nobody wants hearing aids. Not many people want to admit that they have hearing loss, but I'm going to find out, what are your problems? Where are you having difficulty? Are you having problems in noise? The TV? Is your spouse or family member, the big reason you're here? But after a case history, like any doctor, we're going to look in your ears. If your ears need cleaned, hopefully that's just the issue. I take out the wax and we're back in business. But a lot of times, again, if you're over the age of 55, we've got some sort of hearing loss that we do want to measure. Here's my little time to plug my little, my little caveat. Don't use Q-tips. The ears are self-cleaning machines. They're meant to grow the wax outwards, and a Q-tip is jamming that wax in. So a lot of times I do see patients who are just cramming that wax in there, and then I got to go digging and mining for gold and getting rid of that wax. But after we clean your ears, after we're sure you're ready for a hearing loss, we break it down into a couple different categories. The first part is what you think of with the hearing test. You listen for beeps. You press a little button when you hear those beeps. Those beeps are going to get quieter, and I measure at each frequency how quiet can you still hear these beeps. The next part of the test is we we really care about how you can communicate. So I'm going to have you repeat words. A good hearing test should have you repeat words in the presence of background noise. And we go from there. There are ways for me to isolate whether your problem is due to fluid, whether your problem's a nerve problem. There's ways for me to measure your eardrum's ability to move, but in a basic hearing test, it's beeps and words.
I remember sitting in the booth and following your instructions, and I remember the times where I didn't give a thumbs up.
Rest assured, Chris, we double check every frequency. So I used to work at the VA, and I could tell when people were faking. A lot of people would fake at the VA, but the audiologist, they know when it's a real response or not. And if not, they'll yell at you. They'll say you're getting trigger happy or something like that.
So I guess like with anything with technology, there's been quite a big advance with hearing aid technology. And I know for myself, just I think we're a couple of months into these new hearing aids, and goodness, I can kind of control everything right from my phone with the app. I think it's pretty cool. So talk a little bit about the evolution of technology as it relates to hearing aids.
I mean, the first thing I would want to say is technology as an audiologist is a beautiful thing, in my opinion. I love it. I build my own computers. I like tech. But rest assured, hearing aids can be automatic. We do not have to utilize all those features that you're utilizing. And you're one of my fun patients who likes tech. Obviously, you're running a podcast. You're pretty tech savvy. But I get a lot of patients who they're intimidated by the technology. Rest assured, the nice thing about the newer hearing aids coming out is they can do a lot of the work for you. The hearing aids are able to kind of create a map of where is sound coming from, what is good sound, what is bad sound, and they're able to kind of focus in automatically on a lot of the speech sounds, which is what we care about. And that's really where hearing aids have kind of taken a big leap. I've always been able to get people volume, but it's clarity that we're looking for. And how do we achieve clarity? We amplify the good, we don't amplify the bad. So automatically, hearing aids have gotten much better at that, but what you're utilizing are a lot of features. You're able to switch to different modes. You can switch to a background noise reduction mode. You switch to a TV mode. And I always tell people, the more you take control over your listening environment, the better off you're going to be.
Actually, one of the great features for me has been the background noise, especially when I'm recording or in a presentation. I can tone down the background noise, and it helps me focus even more than I could ever have imagined. And I'm just grateful that I took the leap of faith to be able to hear better, because one of the things that I've noticed over the years for me is, I've tried to learn a couple of different languages. I tried to learn Spanish. I want to learn French, but I could never grasp the end of each word from a different language. And now these hearing aids have just turned up the volume to where I can actually hear the words in different languages much more clearer than I ever could before.
It's those initial and final consonants in any language that are going to not only give separation between words, but they give definition to the words. An example I always use is if I say, hey, you're my pick, and you think I called you a pig, those are two different words. And a lot of people with hearing loss are playing detective all day. They're saying, Andrew wouldn't call me a pig in this situation.
No.
It doesn't make sense. But that's where the cognitive load comes in. You're putting more effort into communication. And back into learning languages, you got to think about children. I mean, children are little sponges with the ability to learn languages. And why is that? There's a critical point where we are learning and how to hear. We're learning how to hear different sounds. Humans are born with the ability to understand or hear every sound in any human language. But if you don't use that in your language, you kind of lose the ability to hear it. Individuals who are deaf, like my friend's brother growing up, they have deaf speech because they aren't able to hear these certain sounds while they're developing language. So hearing's a beautiful thing. Learning languages, you need to hear it to remember it, for sure.
This is just off the charts. Very good. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, and I think all of our listeners and viewers will know, and I'll just I'll just pull them out for a second. There's it, the hearing aids with the rubber insert. There's different sizes, and you and I went through 2 or 3 different sizes in order to find the right one that worked for me. And this is like, for me, it's like I clean these every other day, as you suggested, and they just fit like they fit like a glove in my ear.
Well, and what a lot of people don't understand is those aren't just there for comfort. Those are there to hold a certain amount of sound in your ear. The rubber tip that you have in your ear really determines how you're going to hear. So when I was switching those tips on you, I'm just not popping new ones on and sticking them in and saying, does that feel good? I run what's called a feedback test. I'm playing sounds out of those hearing aids and measuring how much sound is leaking out of those. So I get patients sometimes who will come in and they've switched those tips by themselves and they get all sorts of issues and they don't realize, hey, it's not just there for comfort. It's there as part of the actual mechanism to hold sound in. But there's multiple different types of hearing aids. Not everybody is a candidate for the little in the ear guys. It really depends on ear size. It really depends on your hearing loss. So that's why it's important to go to somebody who knows what they're doing.
Again, you're anticipating my next question, because there's some folks that have to have a mold in their ears for their hearing aids. Can you talk a little bit why that is important?
Sure. I mean, molds are used for 2 major reasons. The first reason is if we have a surgical ear or some type of ear where I can't get that rubber tip to stay in there, great. We make a custom mold. It fits like a glove. The other reason would be if we've got a very significant amount of hearing loss, if we start getting up to the moderately severe, profound, I need to make sure that I can hold enough sound in and give amplification without feedback. We have all heard somebody's hearing aids feeding back, whistling, and they're sitting there. Sometimes they don't know what's happening. But when I need to really present a lot of amplification or gain, I need to seal off the ear. And sometimes molds are necessary to get that perfect fit to hold everything in there.
So that gives our viewers and our listeners a clear understanding of why one works more than the other. And it's really determined about your level of hearing. Goodness.
Exactly.
Dr. Wagner. This is so much fun. This is off the charts. We could probably do, and I think we'll probably do many more of these, because this is such an important topic as we age. But let all of our listeners and viewers know how they can learn more about you and the great work that you're doing at Hear USA and Lighthouse Point. I'd
love to answer any questions on email. Chris is going to post my email up. My email is Andrew.Wagner@HearUSA. I'm happy to email back. I'm happy to get a hearing test on you if you're in the area. I go to John Knox Village. I've got an appointment or an office in Lighthouse Point. A hearing test is free, folks. Hear USA offers free hearing tests for everybody once a year. Really, there's no excuse not to see where you're at. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to pressure you into a hearing aid. I will be completely blunt and honest with you. If you're a hearing aid candidate, I will tell you it's ultimately your decision to wear a hearing aid, because in the end of the day, hearing aids take work on my end, but they also take work on the patient's end. They're not something we can just wear an hour a day. We need to train that brain. We need to stimulate the brain. We need to communicate better. So come see me. Email me.
I can attest that's a no pressure. It's a no pressure experience. You're all about helping people hear better. Dr. Andrew Wagner, I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
All right, fun, Chris. Thanks for having me.